Hi everybody, this is Kevin Lim from Kevin's Kitchen. I'm here at Noodles in Hong Kong today. I'll be sharing with you a tomato soup noodle recipe. In my case, I actually take a Southeast Asian twist to this. It's inspired by one of my favorite street side noodles in Hong Kong. It's actually a tomato soup instant ramen, typically eaten for breakfast, but it's also served throughout the day for lunch, for tea time, or even for early dinner. So let's get started, let's go. So for this recipe, I decided to use fresh cherry tomatoes. You can use canned tomatoes if that's what you have on hand. So in this recipe, I'm using Thai basil as the aromatics, along with shallots and garlic and lemongrass, just to give this soup a little bit of a Southeast Asian twist, as I mentioned earlier. In this case, I'm using hor fun. It's in my case, my favorite noodle that I like because it has that bounce to it as you eat it, but it's also wide enough that it carries some of the soup with it. And as for the vegetables, pick and choose what you like. In this case, I'm using broccoli, trumpet mushrooms, and also tofu and bean sprouts. So for this recipe, it's a lot of prep work. Once you have all these ingredients ready, you can actually cook them whenever you like. You don't need to cook all the vegetables at the same time, but just cook the amount that you would want in your noodle soup. So the aromatics, I'm just, in this case, slicing the garlic and then also the shallots, and this will be the base of the soup along with the tomatoes and the Thai basil and lemongrass. So you can slice it. In this case, I'm just slicing it julienne, or you can dice it up depending on how much knife work you want to practice on. But just to make it fast, I'm just slicing these so that you can kind of save on that mincing process. For the tofu, just cube it up, and then you can just set it aside. And make sure you rinse these. Make sure you rinse the tofu, since most of the time if you're buying fresh tofu, it's just been soaked in water, and you just want to rinse that off. So for the lemongrass, I'm actually just peeling the outermost layer. In some cases, if it's really clean, you can actually just wash the outer layer and you can still use it. And since I'm just trying to get the aroma out of this, I'm using the bottom half, the white part of the lemongrass. And I'm pounding this just to bruise it a little bit to start releasing some of those oils in the lemongrass. And for the broccoli, since I'm using this in the soup, I'm not using the stem, but save the stem for something else. So you want to just take off the florets and cut it into smaller pieces so that it can cook easily in the soup. And for the trumpet mushrooms, I'm just slicing it into rounds so that it kind of mimics meat. But in this case, because of the texture of trumpet mushroom, it can actually absorb some of that soup, and then it becomes a very flavorful piece of mushroom. So now that you have everything cut up, you want to just start by heating up a pot with some oil, and then you want to put in the garlic and the shallot and just let it kind of caramelize a little bit, just cooking it down and developing some of those flavors. And you can add in the lemongrass and also the tomatoes and just let it cook down. You want to just let it cook down until the tomatoes soften. Just put a lid on it so that the tomatoes can steam for a little bit. And you can already see some of the tomatoes have already kind of split its skin. So now you can just kind of mash it up and get the juices out of the tomato. In my case, I'm just using a spoon, but you can also use an immersion blender and just blend up this, and so you get a very nice, thick tomato soup. So to this, I'm adding equal amount of water just so that it gives it a more soup-like texture, and it's not going to be too thick like you would in a kind of tomato bisque. So now I'm just adding in the mushrooms, as I mentioned before, so that it can absorb some of those soup flavors in there. And as for the Thai basil, you can see I'm just bruising it up before I throw it in. Again, kind of releasing some of those oils so that you get the fragrance in the soup. And once it comes to a boil, you can actually just throw in some of the vegetables. You don't put in all of it, just put in what you want to eat. If you want to make it more convenient, you can actually just put it into a small ladle or strainer if you have, so that it's easy for you to take out those vegetables. You can see I'm seasoning it with a little bit of salt, and I'm also putting some sugar in there just to balance out the acidity. So now I'm just fishing out some of the whole pieces of tomato so that I can use it as garnish. And as I mentioned, if you want a bit more convenience, you can use a noodle strainer or something that you can cook the vegetables in so that you don't have to do what I'm doing, which is picking it out so that you can garnish it properly. Now you can see I've added the noodle strainer to cook the tofu so that it doesn't break apart. And similar with the noodles, you could just keep it in the strainer so that it's easy for you to kind of just blanch it and then just straight into the bowl. So now assembling it, you just want to arrange the vegetables nicely around it just so that it's more presentable. But of course, if you are in a rush, you can just, have the vegetables in the soup. So for the bean sprouts, I've just blanched it in just plain water for about 20 seconds. So that's how you make my tomato soup noodle recipe. From start to finish, including buying the ingredients from the market, it took me about an hour. So it's definitely achievable to cook a fast dinner at home. So if you want to speed up the process a little bit, you can also use canned tomatoes. There's nothing wrong with that. But because today I was at the market, so I wanted to get some fresh tomatoes to use. In my case, I've used Thai basil and lemongrass. Feel free to if you can't get these ingredients, you can throw in some cilantro, and that will also give you a little bit of a Southeast Asian twist to it. If you like this recipe, please like, share, and subscribe this video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave it in the comment field below, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.